Marriages aren't destroyed by beds, numbers do the demolition. One line in my 401k put a stranger's name where mine belong. 48 hours until the morning hearing. I didn't raise my voice. I started a timer. I'm Glenn Carter, 54. I run a fleet of refrigerated trucks in Tampa. Routes, fuel, compressor temperatures, dock delays. 22 years married. My wife is Tina. Our daughter, Hannah, is finishing high school. I drive a dark cherry 2012 Ford F-150, drink strong Bustelo from a beat-up stovetop brewer, and keep a paper logbook and pencils so the erasures show. When I'm off the clock, I collect old road atlases. Maps tell you where the traffic used to go before someone quietly moved the exit. Friday night felt ordinary, the bay air warm and heavy, the house humming in that steady way you don't notice until it changes. The message hit my inbox at 9:41 p.m. Confirmation, beneficiary update. Corporate portal. Clean template, no drama. Inside the audit trail, yesterday evening carried the stamp of known device. That's the kind of phrase that tries to make you feel safe while it walks past your wallet. I clicked through. A new name sat on my plan as if it had always lived there. The spelling had a familiar tilt, like Tina's maiden name wearing a cheap disguise. Coincidence is allowed once. Twice is a pattern beginning to sketch itself. I walked the house before I let thoughts sprint. The key ring by the door hung upside down. I always leave the logo facing out, so I grab it without thinking. My old green Stanley thermos carried fresh coffee breath even though I'd scrubbed it at dawn. On the hallway switch plate, a thin gleam of skin oil where you wouldn't get it unless you trail your fingers through the dark. None of that would persuade a jury. But fleet work teaches you about small variables. Half a degree in a reefer box turns strawberries to mush. Little things are early warnings. I boiled water the way I always do and watched the vintage kettle fog. The gauge condensed from the top instead of the bottom. People who cover tracks lift the lid near the spout so it doesn't clink. In the garage, under the shelving with the ratchets, a crescent of fresh metal flake caught the light. Someone had shaved a new loop for a lock or hardware. Near it sat a coil of simple twine I don't use. Nylon zip ties are my habit. Again, not proof, but motion. I sat at the kitchen counter with my logbook and wrote down times like I was annotating a highway detour. 1858 Porto Logan. Home Wi-Fi. At 1858, I was in Ybor City babysitting a trailer with a stubborn compressor. The gate stub in my wallet read 1842 in, 1903 out. My phone had been charging on the dispatcher's desk while I wrestled with an infrared thermometer. Two-factor authorization? The portal said. SMS delivered. Delivered where the phone was, not where I was. That's not an argument, that's a route. I moved to the college fund we maintained for Hannah. The balance was thinner than my mental ledger expected, with a trail of small withdrawals. $1, $250 to $1,900. Every 10 or 12 days for 4 months. The recipient listed as Bright Bay Youth. Their website sat in the browser cache, the tab closed but not forgotten. The address led to a co-working space on Northdale Mabry, same building where Tina said she had volunteer meetups, twice this spring. Money is shy about motives but honest about direction. When it leaves footprints. I didn't interrogate anybody. I set water to simmer and stood in the quiet. On the counter hung the rhythm of our life, a chipped bowl with quarters, a little magnet from a Keys gas station, the houseplant Hannah thinks I forget to water. In quiet rooms, bad plans sound louder. I opened our shared cloud drive. The trash contained PDFs labeled like lawyer stationery. Consent to represent. Created via guest account at 5:14 a.m. 3 weeks ago. Guest access is something I spin up for clients when they need to drop tax packets. Not for home. The date matched a port pickup I'd handled at sunrise. The browser cache held a tiny photo nobody intended to keep. A knuckle with a thin scar and a gray strapped watch against our kitchen counter. Not my hand. Not my wife's hand. Nobody on TV would call it a smoking gun. But it narrows a lane. I went to Buddy Brew in Hyde Park at 7:35 a.m. on Saturday. coffee, turkey sandwich, the logbook, and the printed email. I drew a map on a blank page, assets on the left, people in the middle, time down the right. Who could change a beneficiary without my explicit command? Who touches my devices? Who benefits by moving cash quiet? Endgames matter. Drain accounts under cover of routine or make a dramatic exit while neighbors clap at a milestone and miss the ledger? When you manage trailers full of perishable freight, you don't wait for the compressor to quit. You move air now. First valve, the law. I'm not the movie version of anything. I lined up at the Hillsborough County Courthouse door before 9 and claimed a slot the moment the queue opened. I filed for temporary restraints on joint assets, notified the 401k administrator that the change is contested, and asked the bank to freeze the HELOC until authenticity checks pass. I added a simple device audit request and told the bank no new cards without me standing in front of a human. This wasn't jealousy. It was risk control. On the sunblank parking lot, my F-150 gave back heat in waves. On the dash, my old Casio that I throw up there every time I forget to strap it back on read 10:27 a.m. I drove home for documents and saw a small absence that meant more than any long speech. In the laundry cabinet, the stout rubber tie-downs I keep for securing pallet wraps had vanished. Tina never touches those. She uses the cute bungee cords from the beach bin, not the heavy straps with steel hooks. Those hooks are perfect when you want to pin something in a truck bed so it won't slide. At noon I combed the cloud again. Deleted items showed a rhythm. Documents created, shared, then erased by the guest. 21 minutes here, 19 there. The pattern of someone using a checklist. People talk about instincts like they're magic. They're just memory of details. We teach ourselves how our rooms look when no one's pretending. Tina came in close to 11 that night, said she'd been with the girls, planning decorations. I didn't examine her phone. I didn't ask for passcodes. On the lip of the sink I set our old truce token, a narrow rubber band from canning jars. Years ago we agreed that meant we don't fight at night. I didn't plan to talk in the morning either. Talking became just another valve to open at the right time, not a flare gun. I stayed up with a desk lamp and unfolded an atlas from 1978 an old driver gave me when he retired. On the Tampa page there used to be a ramp that no longer exists. I ran a fingernail along the ghost of that turn and thought about how people rewrite routes without telling anyone. Asphalt forgets, paper remembers. So do server logs and docket stamps. Sunday came with low clouds and early heat. I pulled onto the Gandhi Bridge overlook and watched the water carry a silver path out toward the horizon. At 9:12 a.m., the 401k admin pinged. Change suspended pending review. 10 minutes later the bank replied. HELOC frozen for 72 hours. No celebration, not yet. Just a steady note sliding back into tune. You close the money valves, then you evaluate voices. I made myself look at the kitchen like a stranger again. The kettle on the stove was the same make and model but not the same. The whistle cut at a slightly different pitch. The spout had a gentler curve. Someone had swapped one twin for another, not to fool me forever, just to keep me from noticing for a week. In the Ford's bed I found a screw-in anchor point that hadn't existed on Tuesday. A beefy ring meant for a net. Someone was preparing a quick tie-down. Preparing implies intention, not panic. I noted it with the other small tools on my page. QR code on the bank letter, the operator's ID buried in its alt text, the guest account's cadence, the way the switch plate wore fingerprints. I don't light matches in gasoline fog. I let the fog thin. The hearing clock is now part of my breakfast, eggs, toast, legal pad. I listed what matters before any conversation, proofs that don't rely on memory, timestamps that survive shouting, a paper trail that walks by itself into a judge's morning. The temptation in a house like mine is to narrate pain out loud. The discipline is to narrate math. I turned on the garage camera feed and scrolled through the little nighttime blips we all ignore. At 23:02 the motion sensor flicked, nothing visible, but a faint metallic tap registered on the wall mic, thin, like a hook kissing the rail. I wrote that down and drew an arrow to the missing straps. On the pantry shelf sat the replacement kettle box tucked too neatly behind flour. The receipt date matched the guest account morning. Somebody had needed 2 hands-free and quiet hinges. In the dining room, one invitation card for Hannah's celebration lay a stop shade off from the rest as if printed solo at an office on a dying toner. All it took was a different paper stock you only notice if you've spent years matching invoice whites. Fleet managers live by tolerances. I don't trust grand theory. I trust tolerances. By evening, Sunday's heat broke with a brief sprinkle. The smell of wet dust drifted in from the driveway. I sharpened a pencil and went through one last pass on the map I'd sketched at Buddy Brew. Assets, people, time. Arrows toward a quiet exit that someone thought would happen while neighbors clapped and phones filmed. If you expect a scene here, you won't get it. You'll get a ledger. A ledger makes no excuses. It adds. And when addition ends with the wrong number, you don't scream into the vent. You call the clerk, and you stamp the hour. Final hook, part 1 next. I'll slide one QR code apart, and it will whisper the name of a bank employee. The garage mic will cough up a frame it shouldn't have. A smear of silver dust will point to the driver I'm not supposed to know. And a plain brown envelope will be waiting under my wiper at 6:03 a.m. The brown envelope arrived exactly when my pencil said it would. 6:03 a.m. Sunday, due beating along the wiper like Morse code. The paper felt like grocery bag stock, cheap, stiff, meant to hide fingerprints by not taking any. I didn't open it in the truck. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen scale like a parcel, and watched the needle twitch a hair past 1 ounce. Flat, but not empty. Inside, a 4x6 photo of my own driveway from last night, grainy but sharp enough to count screws. My F-150's bed filled half the frame. The new screw-in anchor point I hadn't installed glinted in the porch light. In the bottom corner, a time stamp, 23:02. The same minute my garage sensor blipped, and the wall mic caught a thin metallic kiss. Someone wanted me to know I wasn't imagining the sound. Tucked behind the photo, a cashier receipt from Harbor Freight on Northdale Mabry, 9:10 p.m. Itemized. Deering anchor, cargo net, rubber tie-downs. Last 4 digits of the card, -0427. Not my card. Not Tina's. But the merchant ID matched a store we both drive past twice a week. Price rounded to even dollars in a way most people don't notice. The total, though, felt like a hand tapping my shoulder. Someone either wanted to scare me off or wanted me to keep going, like a person who leaves breadcrumbs with a little chili powder on them, just to see if you'll still eat. I don't plug unknown drives into the family laptop. The envelope also held a cheap USB stick, the kind you get free at trade shows. I fished the old Panasonic from my desk drawer, the one I keep air-gapped for tax season when I mirror client data. No Wi-Fi card, no auto mount. I loaded the stick behind a right blocker and opened it cold. 3 files. 2 JPGs, 1 PDF. One image was a screenshot of a beneficiary update screen from my 401k administrator's system, showing the request stage but not yet finalized, cursor hovering over. Confirm. The other image was a close crop of our kitchen counter, the corner where the guest account had touched down at 5:14 a.m. 3 weeks ago. Same scarred knuckle, same gray-strapped watch, just tighter. The PDF was a scan of a blank, consent to represent, form with a faint watermark from a copy center on Kennedy Boulevard. Someone who knew what to grab had grabbed it. I started a new page in the logbook. Sunday/weather, barometer ticked up, humidity hung in the low 70s. The kind of morning Tampa breathes like a warm towel. I wrote 2 columns in block caps, evidence on the left, unknown hand on the right. Under evidence, I listed timestamps, merchant IDs, all text from the bank QR, the garage mic tick, the guest account cadence. Under unknown hand, I wrote what they wanted me to think, either a warning from inside, or a push from outside. Either a friend of mine, or a friend of hers, or the kind of stranger who sells help by creating fear. I underlined that 3 times. People who manipulate routes don't always need to drive the car. They can move the cones, and you'll steer yourself. At 7:10 I brewed Bustelo and ate a quiet bowl of oats over the Atlas from 1978. On the Tampa spread, a light pencil line from the Gandhi to a service road near a fenced storage yard caught my eye. My own mark from years ago, a shortcut for flatbeds when the crosstown jammed. I remembered why I drew it, and why it still mattered. Paths built for cargo also work for people who don't want to be watched. By 7:35 I had a plan, not a theory. Steps, chain of custody, redundancies. I made 2 fresh copies of every file and time-stamped them on paper, then called my credit union and paid for a small safe deposit box. I drove there with the copies sealed in clear sleeves that can show tamper without drama. At the counter a clerk asked if I wanted autodebit for the box fee. I said no, cash, lower surface area. On the way back I swung through the Buddy Brew drive-thru, kept the truck idling under a strip of shade, and opened the PDF again. Copy center watermark red in micro letters. Kennedy BLVD/MFD 6732/1452. On Fridays Tina's calendar calls her at 3 p.m. to remind her about Decor Committee. If you think I was trying to catch her in a lie, you don't know me. I was building a timeline that didn't need her memory, or mine. When I pulled into our driveway, the kitchen trash had been taken out. The liner was fresh, green drawstrings still creased. It was Hannah's turn this week, not Tina's. Hannah does it after breakfast, not at 7:50 a.m. I checked the outside bin, not to dig, just to look. Right on top, a wrapper from a prepaid SIM, torn the way you tear when you're in a car and don't want to keep the whole package. I wrote down the brand and the truncated ICSID that marketing prints larger than the rest. Not a smoking gun, a smoke pattern. I called Nora S. at 9:03 and left a single message. Received anonymous envelope, adding to packet, see secure link. In the secure upload I included photos of the envelope seams and the items with a ruler beside them. Chain of custody is a boring phrase until the other side claims you planted something. After I hit send, I set my phone down face down and looked around the room like I hadn't lived there for years. The kettle's whistle still sat a hair flat. The fridge hummed. The houseplant leaned toward the slatted light. A clean house can hide a lot when you keep it too clean. At 10:11 I ordered a USPS hold for our address for 3 days and enabled informed delivery. I don't think the mailman is the villain in most stories. I do think envelopes are where people make their easiest mistakes. By noon, I'd added a compartment to the plan I hadn't used in years, a safety protocol for Hannah that doesn't feel like a hostage drill. I wrote 3 lines in an index card, then tore it in half and handed her the top when she came into the kitchen for a vitamin. The rules fit on a thumb, a code phrase she could say if she needed me now, a pretext to get to our neighbor's door without explaining, and a simple, "Don't switch cars or phones today without texting me a photo." She rolled her eyes the way teenagers roll them, then saw my face and didn't joke. She stuck the card in her phone case and said, "Okay." No dialogue tags in the air, just the quiet shift of a daughter clocking that dad's logistics voice is on. Afternoon heat sat on the roof like a thick book. I stood in the garage and ran the camera feed back, frame by frame, to that 23:02 blip. Without the envelope photo, I might have missed it. With it, my eyes found a sliver of movement. A sleeve ghosted along the bed rail, then the reflective wink of a new ring turning home. 2 frames, maybe 3. Enough. I opened the glove compartment and pulled the small hard case I carry for towing. White chalk, measuring tape, a cheap UV flashlight. The UV lit a tiny crescent smear near the new D-ring where a factory coating had rubbed. Someone installed it fast. Fast leaves marks. I didn't swab anything. I'm not a lab. I took a photo with a yardstick and frame and wrote the measurement into the log. For the first time since Friday night I allowed one thought with an edge. This isn't just money. Tie-downs, some wrappers, harbor store receipts, a kosher clean kitchen that never stays this clean. Money's the motive, motion is something else. The question I refused to ask was the loud one. The one I asked instead was trivial and therefore useful. What would a person pack who thinks cargo nets are a solution? Not a suitcase. A bin. Something that slides. I checked the attic. Nothing moved. The shed, garden tools right where I left them. Tina drives a white RAV4 with a rubber cargo mat that always smells faintly like new tires. I didn't open her car. I looked through the rear glass and stared until my eyes stopped telling me a story. The mat had a ripple I'd never seen. I went back inside and wrote, RAV4 cargo mat. Wave left rear. Check later with Hannah present. At 2:30 I drove to the operations center address that hides in the QR's alt text, an office park with tinted windows, no signage, 3 flagpoles, and a badge gate that clicks people in by code. Sunday meant empty, but a guard truck circled slow with the bored relief of a man who already watched his show on the phone. I didn't get out. I took no photos. I memorized the access lane, the service door on the east side, and the camera placement above the loading ramp. Not to break in. To understand how the operator whose ID lived in that alt text moved through their day. If someone inside helped any of this along, they'd have a place to stand that didn't face customers. On the way home I stopped at a Costco gas station even though I had half a tank. Routine is how you get tagged. Benign variations are how you stay invisible. At the pump I smelled a faint solvent, like someone had cleaned a plastic tote recently. I don't think that smell came from my truck. I think it came from the next island over where a gray Tacoma idled with its tailgate up and a net bunched like a sleeping animal in the bed. A man tossed a bundle into the cab and shut the door with a soft palm, not a slam. He looked at me like I was a paper advertisement taped to a post. There, not worth reading. Back home, I set up a simple, legal geofence, not on a person and not on someone else's car. I used what the law gives any careful owner. Find my on-house keys and an AirTag I keep in a family duffel that floats between vehicles for beach days and ball games. If the duffel moved past a sensible radius without my phone nearby, I'd get a quiet nudge. I placed the bag by the RAV4's rear bumper and went inside without dramatics. AirTags are no panacea. They're a doorknob chime, not a lock. Just before sunset a soft beep from the printer startled me. I walked into the office and found the MP tray lit like it had taken a breath. No print jobs showed in the queue. I opened the lid and saw a sheet I didn't feed, plain paper with a single line near the bottom, a ghost image like a half-remembered receipt. Hold confirmed through 06/10, 8 o'clock. My USPS hold request reflected on the glass somehow when someone toggled copy mode, or the machine tried to copy its own status. People think printers are boring. They're tattletales with perfect memories if you know where the logs live. At 8:17 p.m., the informed delivery email landed with the thumbnails of Monday mail. One piece showed a return address from a brokerage in Street Pete where we don't keep accounts. Another showed a local bank's logo on a windowed envelope. The bank one didn't worry me. The brokerage did. St. Pete also hosts a storage complex with garage-style doors and a keypad that uses birthdays for too many passcodes. My pencil hovered. I didn't draw a line between those dots yet. When Tina came home from decor planning, she was bright in the way people are bright when a plan is running on time. She moved through the kitchen like she had a list preloaded in her head. She put grocery bags down, wiped a clean counter, rearranged the fruit in a bowl nobody eats from, and said she might drive Hannah early tomorrow. For the thing. I asked which thing? She waved a hand and said, you know. I wrote the words you know in the margin. Not to catch her. To catch myself if I ever tried to hang a decision on. I guess I knew. After they went to bed, I took the atlas out again. Some men pray with words. I pray with maps, by trusting that routes look inevitable after you've drawn them, even when you walk them blind. I flipped to Arizona and Colorado, then back to Florida. It wasn't a premonition. It was respect for how the country is stitched. Midnight. The house offered up the small sounds, the tinkle of cooling ducts, the dull click of the refrigerator switching cycles, the tiny scratch a gecko makes on a window screen. I checked the AirTag one last time. It sat still. Good. The timer I started on Friday peeled another hour off. 41 to go. At 12:37 a.m. I heard a dryer buzz or soft, like someone didn't want to wake anyone. I opened the laundry door and saw a single item inside, the rubber mat you lay under a cargo bin so it won't skate. Still warm. If you think my blood ran cold, it didn't. It thickened. I wrote, laundry, non-clothing dry, 037. I slept in 2-hour blocks. At 4:58 a.m. my phone hummed with a system alert I programmed after the Harbor Freight receipt. Not a motion alert, not a camera. A calendar block labeled hearing, chain complete. I got up, ironed a shirt I didn't need to iron for a judge who wouldn't see it under a jacket, and checked the envelope packet twice, then 3 times. At 5:47 I stepped onto the driveway and found the second envelope. No stamp, no address, just a triangle of tape holding one flap down. Inside, a single parking receipt torn in half from a lot under the crosstown, time 012, and a post-it in block letters, stop turning off the money. Whoever left it didn't know me. I don't turn off money. I rerouted through valves that make sense. I placed the receipt in a clear sleeve without touching the printed side and wrote the last line I would write before the hearing. 2 hands on the wheel, eyes on the merge, no horn. At 2:14 a.m. the kitchen felt like an unplugged aquarium, still, humid, and too quiet for a Florida night. A vibration I didn't recognize shivered the counter. Not my phone. Not the refrigerator cycling. The sound came from inside the flour tin we keep for Sunday pancakes. I lifted the lid with a dish towel and found a burner phone nested in a Ziploc like a museum tag on a cheap fossil. The screen lit a number with no name, no history, no anything. Curiosity wrestled with procedure for 2 seconds and lost. I let it ring a 7th time and answered on speaker. The mic pointed away. He said, "Truck bed or back hatch?" I replied, "Wrong number." He said, "Then stop killing the flow." The line clicked to static and died. I held the phone with the towel, popped the tray, and took a photo of the SIM. The brand matched the wrapper I'd logged from the outside trash yesterday morning. The exit prefix fell in the range every prepaid kiosk in Tampa spits out. There was nothing exotic about the tech. The exotic part was the location. Someone planted the call where we measure flour. People who want drama choose doorbells. People who want compliance pick kitchens. At 2:39 a.m. a soft ping buzzed the nightstand. The AirTag I'd buried in our family duffel drifted past the radius I'd set. The map dot jumped onto the wrong bridge for any errand at that hour, not the Gandhi, not the Crosstown, but the Howard Franklin, heading east. The RAV4 sat under our carport. My F-150 rested where I left it. The bag had a new ride. I watched the dot crawl toward the interchange like a beetle across a paper line. AirTags don't give you Sherlock. They give you a bell on a cat you don't own. The dot slid into a warehouse zip and then fell silent, too far from any friendly device to whisper. I wrote the time down and turned the kitchen burner off under the kettle I'd never lit. I wasn't going to chase. I was going to anchor. At 5:47 a.m., the second envelope appeared on my windshield with the parking stub and the block letters telling me to stop closing valves. I put it in a sleeve, wrote the minute, put on a shirt I could show a judge without apology, and turned the morning into a checklist. The burner phone went into a small Faraday sleeve I keep for tax season when clients hand me thumb drives they found in desk drawers. I didn't wipe anything. Chain of custody beats satisfaction. By 8:17 I was in the courthouse hallway under fluorescent light that makes everybody look like their own photocopy. Nora joined by video, the file stack in her square labeled with the case number we'd started yesterday. Ex parte hearings eat breakfast broadcasts. They run on clocks and statutes. I put my packet on the table, photos with rulers, the bank letter with the QR alt text scribbled in the margin, the AirTag map print, and the envelope log. The judge skimmed, asked 2 questions, and turned the room into a stamp. The orders landed the way Florida rain lands in summer, sudden, brief, and enough to soak what matters. Temporary restraining orders on the joint accounts. A hold on beneficiary changes. A bank instructed to treat any contested moves as contested. The kind of paper nobody celebrates on courthouse steps because there are no balloons for. We slowed the damage. When I stepped outside, the June sun hit like a warm compressor hose. A street sweeper coughed around the block. My phone hummed twice. One message from the 401k admin acknowledging the court order. One from the bank confirming a review flag on our helic. I didn't smile. I exhaled a little deeper. Then I drove to the office park whose side door I'd mapped in part 2, the one tucked on the east wall behind 3 anonymous flagpoles and a badge gate that takes more pride in beeps than human faces. Sunday had been quiet there. Monday had a pulse. I parked on a public street with a sight line on the service door and let the truck's fan whir on the low setting. At 12:03 a.m. man stepped out, not in a uniform but in the kind of business casual that hits the most average note possible. Khaki pants, polo that pretends not to sweat, a lanyard with a plastic badge resting on a stomach that stands in line for the break room honey buns. He canted toward the ramp, took a call, and raised the badge to push the side reader without looking. The camera on my dash caught the freeze when he paused in profile. I thumbed the zoom. The 5 digits on the badge sat under his name like an afterthought, 4816. I didn't chase him. I didn't walk closer. I wrote 4816 on my paper and drew an arrow to the alt-text operator ID I pulled from the bank QR Friday night. Inside systems pretend not to rhyme with outside behaviors. They rhyme anyway. On the way home I took a long arc past the crosstown and skimmed St. Pete boulevards where storage units line up like uniform teeth. The air smelled like sunscreen and hot PVC. I didn't turn into any gates. I let my eyes inventory what any Tampa resident can inventory. Keypad pads worn smooth in the middle, gate arms with 3 dings on the same side, units with new brass locks and unit doors that shine just a shade too fresh. Nobody puts a target on the door they want you to ignore. They make it look like every other door. Back at the house the afternoon hung heavy and green. I opened the pantry and looked at the flower-tint space as if it were a chalk outline. The lid sat square now. The burner phone in its sleeves sat square in my packet. I sanitized nothing. The less clever I tried to be, the cleaner the line would be later. Hannah banged through at 3:10, grabbed a seltzer, and measured my face in 2 seconds. Teenagers read weather. I said we might have a neighbor run her to a friend's if she needed anything after dark. I answered no questions she didn't ask. By 5 I got the informed delivery ping again, the brokerage envelope out of St. Pete had turned into a longer sequence with machine track tags that spooked the layperson. To me they said, "Bulk print run with variable data." I wasn't interested in the ad copy. I was interested in the timing. Whoever had mailed that letter didn't expect me to put a stop on changes before the piece landed. Timing in schemes is like axle grease. If it's wrong, wheels burn. At 7:41 p.m. My kitchen camera framed the kind of movement only a person who has watched too many empty videos would notice. The pantry door opened while Tina stood at the sink, and not because a draft caught it. A shadow passed between the counter and the door like a hand testing gaps. When she turned, the door closed by itself. Somebody learned that my house notices loud closers. 2 minutes later, the printer in the office breathed once, a small motor grunt on standby. No job. I had already photographed the glass with yesterday's reflected. Hold confirmed. The machine didn't give me a new confession, just a cough. I took it anyway. At 9:03 p.m. the AirTag woke and moved, this time in our neighborhood grid, not over a bridge. The family duffel's position slid from our driveway to the street, then paused at the curb like a dog uncertain of command. I killed the porch light at the switches we never use and let the driveway camera feed fill the laptop. At 9:17, headlights rolled soft, not bright, and a tailgate set down quiet. That gray Tacoma again, or a twin. The driver wore a ball cap with a bill so curved it could have been sold as a parenthesis. He moved with the economy of someone who doesn't need to prove he's strong. He set a plastic tote in my truck bed with both hands and reached for the net that wasn't there yesterday. He hooked the new D-ring like he'd installed it himself, then spread a black cargo net over the bin, fingers finding bungees like piano keys. Motion sensor popped. He froze without looking up. Then he finished the last hook and tapped the tote twice, the way drivers tap straps before a long run. If he'd glanced at the cab, he would have seen my Napa cap on the seat. He didn't glance. He slid back into the Tacoma and idled down the block, never over 20, like a man allergic to attention. I did nothing. The camera did work I couldn't do without becoming the story. When the Tacoma turned the corner, I walked to the truck and put a hand on the tote. Cool to the touch. Heavier than the bins we use for beach days. The net sat tight. Along the lip of the tote, a hairline smear of that same metal flake winked under the garage bulb. The man who bought the net last night had now given me a reason to inventory exactly what his net wanted to hold. I didn't cut anything, didn't open anything, didn't even breathe too loud. I measured, photographed, and walked back inside. At 10:22 p.m., I parked the F-150 nose in instead of tail in for once, a minor change that put the bed under a better slice of camera angle. I pinged Nora a single line. Object delivered, photos uploading, no contact made. Then I sat in the living room with my atlas open to a page that had nothing to do with Florida. Colorado mountain passes penciled by a driver who taught me how to listen to diesel when it whispers. The sound of my own house taught me enough tonight. Near midnight, my watch buzzed with a calendar reminder I'd named in a way to make me laugh once. Somebody lies better in the morning. Not funny now. Useful anyway. I checked the AirTag one more time. The duffel dot slept in my driveway. The tote, under the net someone else bought, slept in my bed. Gravel popped at the edge of the block. The Tacoma crawled past, slow enough to read our mailbox numbers. It didn't stop. The night went still again like a staged photograph. I thought about the 4816 badge stepping out of the side door and the man's non-face. I thought about a flower tint singing questions and a SIM card that belonged to nobody. I thought about the cargo net tugging neat little diamonds across the lid of a box that could live in any garage in America and how, by morning, that box would be an exhibit. It wouldn't prove a crime by itself. It would prove motion. Motion, juries understand. Morning made the tote look ordinary, the way danger always downgrades itself under fluorescent light. I didn't lift the lid in my driveway. I put it in the F-150 bed the way a courier handles a parcel with the address smudged, drove to a UPS store that does mobile notarizations, and asked for something most people don't ask for at 9:01 a.m. A notary to timestamp an inventory I was about to make, with me swearing under penalty that I hadn't touched a thing since last night, and that photos would be taken at each step. The man behind the counter didn't blink. Florida sees stranger Mondays. The notary watched me place the tote on the counter, watched me photograph the lid from 4 angles with a yardstick and frame, and watched me break the 2 zip ties that weren't mine. He didn't opine. He wrote as I spoke. I lifted the lid. The smell was plastic and solvent with the ghost of new rubber. On top lay a folded moving blanket, still creased from the shelf, then a black cargo net with tags from Harbor Freight that matched the receipt time in yesterday's envelope. Beneath that, a shallow crate tray with a coil of rubber tie-downs, 6 heavy bungees, a pack of nitro gloves, a roll of gray duct tape, and a pocket box cutter with 1 blade extended and taped shut for shipping. None of that alone is a crime. It's a language. Under the tray, a cheap digital voice recorder in retail clamshell, a 3-pack of prepaid SIMs, the same brand as the wrapper I found in the outside bin, 2 disposable rain ponchos, and a folded tarp cut to truck bed width. Then paper. Paper talks when you let it. An itinerary printed in a font people use when they want to look official without being official. MO and storage TUE meet at 6 p.m. WED move early, with arrows drawn in pen. A crumpled index card with a number that looked like a storage unit, C118, underlined twice. A post-it with 061975 and the word gate next to it. A glossy 4x6 showing a row of uniform doors painted a blue I'd seen yesterday off U.S. 19. In the lower corner, Faint in the sun, a date stamp you only get if you turn the cheap setting on your phone's camera. 2 weeks old. At the bottom of the tote sat a flat key fob with a barcode like the ones local storage companies hand you when you sign. No name, no unit number on its face. The notary initialed each photo as I laid items in rows. He notarized my single-paragraph affidavit of inventory and time, signed his name, and slid the page back like he was handing over a library book. I thanked him and left the store with copies sealed in a document envelope, and the tote closed again. I didn't take anything home. I drove it straight to my credit union branch, rented a safe deposit box big enough for the tote's guts, and asked the clerk to watch while I photographed the box number and my watch face in the same frame. Chain of custody is a phrase you don't appreciate until somebody says you made something up. I didn't intend to prove drama. I intended to prove sequence. In the truck with the AC fighting June, I texted Nora the photos and the affidavit, then called and spoke exactly one sentence. We have a unit queue, a likely gate code, and a printed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday plan. I heard her typing. She said, "We'll move on emergency orders for non-removal of the child and preservation of community property. Do not enter any unit without law enforcement. Do not be the one who finds the thing." I said understood, and pulled onto the road that turns small errands into long Florida arcs. The storage facility on my mind stood on a straight run of asphalt north of St. Pete where the sun bakes the roofs low and white. 11:20 a.m. Heat already hard, the kind that shimmers above the hood and makes your thoughts wavy if you let them. I didn't go in. I drove past 3 times from 3 directions, watched gate rhythm, counted cars, and noted which cameras overlapped. Most lots run fixed lenses that leave a short seam between the keypad and the lane. This one had a newer dome pointed high in a way that caught a triangle of both. Overlap is rare. Accidents teach managers to aim better. A gray Tacoma, not necessarily the gray Tacoma, queued up and stopped at the keypad. I watched nothing. I watched everything. The driver cupped his hand over the pad like he was blocking wind that didn't exist, and tapped 6 keys no civilian could see. The gate arm lifted on a low hum. My hand stayed open on the wheel. I didn't want to be a detective. I wanted to be a witness. I left the road and sat in a Publix lot 2 blocks down, the kind of Florida neutral ground where everybody goes and nobody looks twice at a truck idling in the sun. I pulled the atlas out on my lap only to give my hands a job. When you spend time with maps, you learn how to wait. Noon settled like warm syrup. A khaki and polo man walked out of the storage office with a clipboard he didn't carry yesterday. The badge hung off his belt. Profile turned, and light hit plastic. 4 numbers, same order as the bank operator ID I'd pulled from the QR code, 4816. He wasn't a villain. He was a function, the way a relay is a function in a freezer truck. He signed for something the manager handed him, scanned a barcode with the laziest beam I've seen, and disappeared into a corridor behind the desk that didn't lead to any units. I wrote, 4816 clipboard at office door, 1212, and circled it. At 1:40 I drove the long way home. Tampa reassembled itself into errands and air and the sound of lawn equipment from 3 houses at once. I ate 2 pieces of cold chicken over the sink because a plate sometimes feels like a speech. Then I laid out the afternoon like a load plan. 2 stops, both controlled, either dramatic. First stop, the bank branch where an assistant manager could make a phone call that turns a warning flag in a computer into a hold that can't be charmed away by anyone with a headset and patience. I brought the notarized inventory, the tote photos, and the hearing orders. The manager read faster than some people breathe. He didn't ask for the story behind the story. He pointed a pen at the phrase, contested changes, and said, "We'll treat anything touching this account as needing 2 wet signatures and a call back to you, not to a device." I said, "Thank you. People who do the right thing without speeches make me like my state." Second stop, a parking lot outside a strip of businesses where men in work boots buy hoses and clamps, and the kind of things that live longer than the trucks they ride in. The gray Tacoma that wasn't necessarily the gray Tacoma sat 3 spaces from the door, tailgate up this time, a net bunched under a blue tarp. I put my truck 2 rows over where I could see, then put away the atlas so I wouldn't look like a man trying to look like a man reading a map. At 3:22 the driver came out carrying a box that had no logo and too much tape. He set it in the bed with 2 careful hands. When he straightened, I walked across the lanes without hurry and stopped at a distance that lets a stranger hear you without making him choose between running and hitting. He said, "You lost?" I replied, "You put something in my truck last night." He said nothing. I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the only shape that fits truth. He said, "We strap bins." "That's a thing we do," I replied. "A notary watched me open it. We filmed every inch. A judge has my affidavit. If that tote had contained something ordinary, I wouldn't be here." He looked at my face, then at my hands, then at the lot like he was measuring cameras. He said, "You're making a lot of noise, very quiet." I replied, "Good plans die in quiet." He didn't posture. Men who do this work don't. He tapped the side of his truck with 2 fingers and said, "Ask for Delta Lock at C118. Manager will know the fee. If she doesn't, wrong place." I said nothing because any word from me could be a step too many into his world. He said, "Gate code is a birthday most places. They don't think to change it when they're busy making lists." I replied, "I saw the list." He said, "Then you already know more than I should be telling you." He paused, looked past me to the row of cars like he was checking an invisible timetable, and added 1 sentence like he was reading it from a printed card. "If you're as calm as you look, go slow by the side door at the office park, 2 after 5. He got in his truck and left as if he had become air. Nothing in me wanted to follow air. Back home, the house was cooler than the street by a kind of grace air conditioners only give when you deserve it. Hannah asked if she could go to a friend's later. I told her yes, but to send me a photo of every adult in the room when she arrived, and to Uber home on my account, not ride-sharing with friends. I made 3 small sandwiches and didn't eat any of them. I watched our front camera angle and the tree shadows walk the lawn as the sun thought about leaving. At 4:58, I was parked on the public street near the side door of the office park where 4816 had paused yesterday. 2 after 5 grew on the clock. The door opened in a slice. 4816 stepped out, clipboard under an arm that carried nothing heavy, and looked both ways like a theater usher making sure the aisle was clear. He walked along the building to a smoking area no one smokes in and set the clipboard on a small metal table as if he needed 2 hands free to tie a shoe that didn't need tying. He didn't tie it. He took out a phone, turned the screen away, and kept it to his ear without talking. A woman came out the door behind him, no badge visible, keys in hand like a talisman. She said, "You forgot the record change authorizations." He said, "I don't need the paper. It's cute." She said, "We still sign it. That's why it's called authorization." He didn't like that. He took the clipboard back through the door and let it close behind him with a soft latch. In the reflection on the glass I saw the column header that makes bank men feel bigger than they are. Q. Beneficiary/next steps. Columns. Rows. Enough for a human to mistake inevitability for authority. I left without getting out of my truck because I wasn't there to make a scene with a spreadsheet. I was there to make sure the story I'm writing with timestamps would read the same in any light. On the way home I turned into the storage complex, finally, and went as far as the public office. Air conditioning, pens on chains, the smell of brochures. I asked about renting a unit big enough for a bed, a desk and boxes. The manager smiled like she had been waiting all day to say, "First month free." I smiled back like I might move boxes at any minute. While she talked, I let my eyes read her countertop. Rentals to the left, lock fees to the right. In the stack labeled accessories, a laminated card read Delta Lock, $18.99. Delta Lock isn't a product line on their website. It's a signal for a different kind of service. The fee they charge when someone wants a hard-to-cut lock on the very first day. I signed nothing. I took no brochure. I walked back out into heat the same way I walked in. At dusk I sat at the kitchen table with the tote inventory spread by photographs and the notary's stamp catching lamplight. Tina moved through the room in straight lines. She wiped a clean thing. She set down mail. She took a call and said, "I'll confirm later." I wrote, "Later," in the margin. People think the opposite of now is never. The opposite of now is later, and later is the average speed of bad plans. Hannah came home at 8:21 and sent me the photos I asked for: 3 adults in a living room, 2 dogs, a bowl of chips, a TV tuned to a game nobody cared about. I wrote down the adults' names the way dads write down names when they don't want to admit why it matters. At 9:30, our printer woke itself again. I walked in and looked down at the glass, half expecting the ghost of another status message. Nothing this time. The tray was warm with a blank sheet. People think printers only talk when they spit paper. They talk when they breathe. I pressed the home button and saw a job in memory labeled Copy 1. Who asked the machine to copy nothing at 9:29? The quiet does you favors if you stop insisting it owes you noise. At 10:11, the air tag nudged once as the family duffel moved 6 feet from where I'd left it, then returned. A test. Either mine or theirs. I breathed out and let it be mine. Midnight came in ordinary clothes. The Atlas waited for my hands and got them. I traced a line from Tampa to a point on I-75 where people who think Tuesday is safe sometimes learn Wednesday has longer arms. I closed the book when my watch told me to. The clock rolled past the number I gave myself at the end of part 3. The tote's contents had turned from props to nouns. The unit number had turned from a guest to a door. The badge on the lanyard had turned into a person who forgets that cues have authors. Monday didn't arrive with answers. It arrived with processes. I started where paper matters more than posture, at the storage office counter that smells like brochures and hot plastic. I set down the emergency orders Nora pulled yesterday, the notarized tote inventory, and my driver's license. I didn't mention anyone's names. I said I needed a manager service called a Delta lock, overlock on a unit I had reason to believe held community property under a court hold. The manager read faster than most people breathe. She didn't ask for the soap opera. She asked for a unit. I said, C-118. She typed, looked, typed again, then turned the monitor so I could not see it, which told me everything about whether C-118 existed. I slid the fee across. She said the quiet sentence that separates staff from spectators. We can add our overlock without opening the door. We cannot inventory contents without law enforcement or a warrant. I said, that's exactly what I want. A hold, not a show. She called a porter with a cart and a small drill. Protocol made the rest boring, the way good safety procedures should be. We walked in a line that made us look like we were delivering mail. The porter scanned, photographed the door seam, photographed the existing lock, and snapped on the round hockey puck overlock the laminated card had promised yesterday. Delta lock $18.99, no drama. A sticker with a number like a license plate went across the hasp in a way that would tear if someone tried to finesse. The manager signed her initials on the sticker with a blue pen and wrote the time, 10:14. I took photos with a yardstick and frame. Chain of custody is oxygen. You only notice when it's gone. Gate access was the kind of trivia that tells on habits. To reach the hall, the manager had to punch the pad. She cupped her hand out of habit and still said out loud without realizing it, the way clerks do when their brain runs faster than their mouth. 061975. I didn't repeat the code. I didn't need to. People use birthdays because they think dates are friendly. Friendly and predictable are neighbors. Predictable gates open on blue doors. I left the hall the same way I came, sun translating concrete heat up through my boots. In the office, the manager printed 2 things, a 1-page, legal hold, notice to tape on the inside of C-118 after law enforcement did its part, and a service receipt with the overlock serial number. I folded both into a clear sleeve and wrote the time across the top. If this turned into a story, I wanted it to be a story a clerk could follow. On my way out, I parked across the street in a strip mall where Florida hides its neutral ground: nail salons, a coin laundry, a tax preparer with a permanent January banner, and a sandwich shop open too early for what it sells. I let the F-150 idle on low, the fan moving warm air like a slow river. From there I could see the storage gate and the approach lane where two cameras overlap like cross flashlights. At 11:03 a.m. gray Tacoma rolled from the far corner and stopped at the keypad. Ball cap bill curved like a parenthesis. The driver cupped his hand the same way the manager had, because everyone who uses a keypad believes eyes are always watching. The arm lifted. He eased through. I didn't follow. I kept my eyes on the office door. 5 minutes later he reappeared, not at the hall but at the counter, the posture of a man who doesn't waste speed. He said something I couldn't hear through glass and conditioning. The manager said something with one shoulder shrug and a palm flattening the page. He turned his head a fraction toward the hall and shook it once, not in anger, just acknowledging the shape of the day. He walked back out, got into the truck, and didn't slam. People who use nets don't slam. The Tacoma moved to the far fence and idled where both cameras would catch his plate by accident. Accidents help ordinary men more than plans do. I left him to his circle and drove to the office park that pretends it has no name. Badges beeped. Flags did nothing. At 12:12 the side door opened a slice and 4816 stepped into the light with paperwork he shouldn't have carried past glass. Q, beneficiaries/next steps, printed at the top in the font that makes men confuse columns with authority. He balanced the clipboard on a rail by the smoke pad, phone tucked under chin like a hinge, and made that small mistake every human makes twice a year. He reached for keys, shifted weight, and the top sheet slid under the clipboard, then off, then onto the pad. He didn't notice. He jammed the phone back in his pocket, picked up the board, and went inside. I didn't touch the paper. I let the sun do its thing. It blew the corner up just enough for a camera to read a line. Pending, manual confirm required with wet signature when operator state equals contested. I took a single photo from public sidewalk with the zoom a phone gives any person, then watched a woman with a janitor's cart roll the bin over the sheet and scoop it into corporate forgetfulness. The world erases its tells for you if you wait long enough. At 1:30, I met Nora in her square on my phone again, this time at a table in a Starbucks that tries to be cold and never quite makes it. I threaded the two worlds together for her without embroidery, overlock added, gait habits observed, badge man sloppy with paper, Tacoma practicing patience. She said the words you hire lawyers to say so you don't have to. We will ask for a sheriff's civil standby at the unit this afternoon. You will not open a door. The manager will open if the deputy smells hazard or sees active tampering. If not, we keep the hold and build the rest. Then she added the thing that separates good counsel from brave ones. And Glenn, do not win any scenes today. Scenes are for people who don't like outcomes. At 3:05 a.m. Hillsborough deputy showed up in the storage office like he was picking up dry cleaning, clipboard, pen, patient eyebrows. He read Nora's faxed orders, signed a line I'd never seen on a form I hoped to never see again, and asked the manager if there had been complaints about odors, leaks, or heat. The manager said she'd had a solvent smell in the South Hall on Sunday. Solvent is a word that makes fire inspectors sit up even when it's Monday. The deputy nodded toward the hall. We walked the same quiet route as the morning, manager, deputy, me trailing with my hands open, nothing in them but air. At C-118 the deputy stood to the side of the seam and sniffed the way men sniff who have stored too many lawn mowers. He said, "You smell it?" The manager said, "Yes." He said, "Open for safety." The manager peeled the blue ink sticker, slotted a key into the overlock without spinning the disc, and let the pucks drop. She didn't touch the customer lock. She lifted the door 6 inches and stopped. The smell that came out was exactly the smell I'd caught at the Costco pump when a man with a net had cleaned a bin. Plastic solvent, faint, sticky sweet. The deputy raised the door to shoulder height, shined a light, and told me to stay back. I did. He didn't inventory. He observed. He said the phrase that keeps people out of trouble and in courts. I see no immediate fire hazard. I see materials that warrant preservation. Manager relock, note this. She slid the door down, relocked the puck, signed her notebook on the hall wall where she writes meter reads and exceptions. No drama. No trophies. A note on paper someone else will read later when asked. What did you do on Monday? I never saw inside C-118. I didn't need to. The deputy's body cam saw more than I did. The manager's pen remembered details better than any story I could tell. I had what I came for, the combination of hold, overlock, and witness. A tote full of nothing illegal, and a unit that smelled like plans now lived in the same folder. Pattern beats protest. I left, not because I felt satisfied, but because the next valve wasn't mine to turn. On the way out, the gray Tacoma rolled back in as if the driver had been orbiting the block, burning quiet gas. He stopped at the keypad, didn't punch anything, then backed away to a shade line and waited. He saw the deputy car in the lot reflection. He made a decision men in his trade make to live long. He left without testing the door. By 5, the light went warm and kind the way it only gets after a day that refused to give you spectacle. I parked at a neutral strip of asphalt outside a tire shop where air hoses hiss like snakes and everyone minds their business. I stood where the cameras mounted to 2 storefronts overlap into AV. When the Tacoma eased 3 spots over, I didn't walk to him yet. I texted Nora one sentence. At neutral ground, video only capture, no audio. Florida records don't love hidden microphones. I recorded with the mic off. He said, "You're going to make this ugly." I replied, "It's already neat." He said, "You think you're safe because you like pens?" I replied, "I'm safe because a notary signed before you strapped a net." He said, "You'll run out of signatures." I replied, "You'll run out of Mondays." He looked at the sky like he had expected it to be darker by now. He said, "You don't know the rest." I replied, "I know enough to hold doors closed until other people open them." He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He tapped his cap twice, the non-salute men give when they've already left, and drove away slow enough to make sure every camera got a full plate. Back home, the house smelled like lemon cleaner no one had used. Tina moved through the kitchen in straight lines, her eyes trying to stay wider than questions. She said dinner would be late. I said I had eaten earlier. She said nothing. Silence is a staircase. You choose whether to climb. I didn't. I washed a single coffee cup and dried it the way you dry when you want the towel to remember the shape of your day. Hannah texted that she would be home by 9 and that her friend's dad had insisted on seeing her to the door. Small good men exist. They usually carry groceries, not speeches. At 8:56 the informed delivery app flashed a new scan, a brokerage envelope with my name misspelled by 1 letter, the kind of letter a person swaps when they think changing a name is like changing a bulb. It would land Tuesday. It wouldn't matter Tuesday. Tuesday had just been pulled into today. At 9:40, the office printer hummed again. I walked in, more out of respect than expectation. On the glass, a smudge, not numbers, not letters. The print head had dragged a trace of the blue notice the manager taped inside C-118, as if the same motion had migrated across town on a wire and rubbed up against my machine. I know that's not how ink works. I also know stories have pieces that want to touch. I wiped the glass and wrote one final line in the log for the day. Holds applied. Motion documented. No scenes. I slept the way men sleep when they haven't won and haven't lost. 2 hours at a time, eyes opening to the feeling of a valve turning somewhere far away. At 2:11 a.m., the porch camera captured a soft shape at the mailbox. Someone careful, not hurried, sliding a flat into the slot. At 2:14, my phone buzzed a calendar block I hadn't made. Checklist, Hannah. I didn't create it. My daughter did. She had shared it with me and made it public to one person, me. The entries were simple. Photo when I arrive. Code phrase if I need you now. Don't switch cars. No flourish. No emojis. Just a kid who decided lines matter more than noise. At 12:06 a.m., the RAV-4 sang 3 soft door-ajar beeps, then again 30 seconds later. The dome light bloomed and died, just long enough for a hand to shift weight on the cargo mat. I didn't rush. Chalked each tailgate screw so any later turn would leave a crescent missing. 12:37. The dryer ran 5 minutes with a single rubber anti-slip mat. I wrote both times down, digits, no adjectives. Morning came blue and quiet. Hannah walked in, hair up, phone face down, and said the sentence you only say after rehearsal, she said. I saw the papers 3 weeks ago. Folder name. AZ Doc. One way into Sky Harbor, tabs on renewing ID in a new state. A new school packet. A spreadsheet with columns for mail hold /unit paid /gate code. Her own birth date sat there as a 6-digit key. I didn't deputize her. I restated the 3 rules on her index card and added one. If an unfamiliar door opens, walk to Mr. Keen's porch with nothing but the code phrase. She nodded. At 9:11 I called the bank's operations desk. He said, Operations, Danielle, case number? I replied. And please confirm, when state equals contested, manual changes need a wet signature in person. He read from the book I'd already seen, he said. Yes, overrides must be logged and reviewed. I replied. Then there's a log from noon yesterday. He said. I can't discuss internal IDs. I hung up. Whether that voice belonged to badge 4816 or a neighbor cubicle didn't matter. The policy lived on their side of the line. Informed delivery glitched and showed 2 scans. My name misspelled on a brokerage envelope, Tina's maiden name spelled clean. It would land by noon, too fast unless the wheels had turned midweek. Disasters don't start on weekends. They start on Wednesdays, quiet. Lunch hour at the office park. I parked on public sidewalk, unwrapped a sandwich, and let the side door write its own paragraph. 12:05, 4816 stepped out, answered a personal call where he was only supposed to be a job title, and made the edit out loud. He said, Not Tuesday anymore, tonight. We lost the window. I don't want paper on my desk if there's a hold. Sun on khaki, badge a small plastic moon. I stay there. 3:02, door ajar ping from the unused back door at home. The HVAC clicked, the hallway vent hummed, and a whisper threaded the metal slats. She said, Tonight. 9. Bridge. Not a weekday. Not. Later. Tonight. I texted Nora. Timing moved 2100 hours. Bridge unspecified. Civil standby if movement. She called back. If removal of the child is attempted, 911 first, me second. Document. No scenes. Hannah hovered, older by an hour. I told her to prep 3 items only she would think to take, stash them in a pillowcase on Mr. Keen's porch with a please leave note. She did it. The porch cam recorded a summer object, nothing more. At 6:14 the brokerage letter arrived 2 hours early. Recently updated beneficiary designation. If you did not initiate, please call. I scanned the watermark, sleeved the paper with the tote inventory and overlock receipt. Folders are how you breathe when rooms get thin. 7:03. A gray Tacoma drifted past our block like a fish skirting dock lights. No stop. He was checking if I chase. I didn't. 8:41. The RAV-4 hatch popped and sealed, chalk still crisp, but the cargo ripple had migrated center, as if the load changed shape, not weight. The AirTag in the family duffel chirped then went still. 8:57. Tina came in with the practiced calm of a preloaded face, straightened a straight towel, moved a bowl that didn't need moving, wiped a clean counter. The porch cam pinged, an envelope laid down like a sleeping cat. Inside, my informed delivery printout, 2 pieces circled, 1 word in thick marker, tonight. Not her hand. Not Hannah's. A glove that learned cursive. I scanned it and filed it. I took out the atlas, the base stitched with bridges like sutures, and traced all 3, Howard Frankland, Gandhi, Courtney Campbell. The AirTag would choose. The law would decide when to move. Not before. At 9:22 the Faraday-sleeved phone buzzed anyway. Calendar reminders don't need radios. The title I set yesterday blinked on black glass. Later is over. I moved to the truck, placed the hearing order and notarized tote inventory face up on the seat, opened only 2 windows, AirTag map and the sheriff's non-emergency line, ready to become emergency. 9:47, the dot glided east, off our street grid and onto Bay Black. The RAV4's taillights slid into distance. The line over water thinned into certainty. My pencil didn't shake. The hallway vent coughed one last word, so soft you could miss it if you like noise. She said, "Midnight. Midnight isn't Tuesday. Midnight is tonight." I wrote plan advanced, bridge TBD, midnight across the top line of the log and closed the book. Everything that needed to be paper was already paper. Everything that needed to be camera already was. At 11:42 p.m., the bay looked like poured graphite with stitches of bridge light laid over it. I sat in the F-152 blocks off the causeway, not hiding, not chasing. The atlas was open to a half page where the Howard Franklin and Gandhi and Courtney Campbell sit like 3 options men pick when they think no one's watching. My phone showed one screen only, the AirTag sewn into our family duffel. The line thinned toward water. I called the sheriff's non-emergency number the way dispatchers call. Dates, times, case number, the civil orders already on file, the child safety instructions Nora drilled into me. I said nothing about feelings. I said where a welfare check would be lawful and dull. The operator's voice was a map. She said a car would stage near the boat ramp turnout. No sirens. No theater. At 11:57 the dot chose its answer, angled south and west, the rhythm of the Gandhi. The RAV4's taillights slid into the camera's edge and out again, unhurried, not erratic, not proud. I set the hearing order face up on the seat and pressed the notebook flat with my palms so the pencil wouldn't roll when the truck breathed. Across the bay, a patrol SUV eased out of the dark like a dock light deciding to be useful. Timing, not noise. When the RAV4 reached the turnout, the SUV let its bar glow polite and blew once. The kind of blue that says paperwork, not menace. I parked where the public has a right to be, angled so my dash camera would catch only what the world already gets to see. I walked no closer than I had to. A deputy with patient eyebrows talked to Tina the way professionals talk when everyone's night will go better if words wear uniforms. He said, "We're here for a welfare check and to verify civil paperwork." She said something I couldn't hear. He didn't flinch. He asked her to step out, then to open the hatch. She did. Chalk on my tailgate screws back home would tell me later if anyone had spun them. Chalk on her cargo screws told me nothing now, because we weren't taking cars apart at midnight. The deputy leaned just enough to see. He said, "No child inside. What's the destination tonight?" She said a road name that isn't a destination. He said, "Ma'am, I'm going to photograph the interior and the bags and read a short paragraph." He read the paragraph Nora loves more than any speech, the one where the court's orders are boring and precise and bigger than plans. He pointed to the duffel. I raised my hand and said the smallest sentence a calm man can say without spoiling his own case. "That bag is mine. I can confirm the AirTag is inside." He nodded, lifted his phone, and took the photo anyway. Chain of custody doesn't need my permission, it needs light. He asked Tina to produce ID. She did. He photographed the letterhead on my order and made a radio noise that sounded like a man checking his own math. He said, "Here's what happens, you may drive home now. If you continue past county, we will request a second unit. If there is any attempt to remove property under legal hold, call will escalate. There is no child tonight. That makes this conversation short." He held her gaze not to win a scene but to finish a paragraph. She nodded. The nod said more than any argument ever would. The gray Tacoma ghosted by during the last sentence, slow as a fish near a pier. He didn't pull in. He didn't stop. He let his brake lights glow polite and rolled on. People who live long in that trade know the difference between a night that can be nudged and a night that is already stamped. I didn't follow anyone. I let everyone go in the order paper decided. The patrol SUV drifted after Tina at a neighborly distance. I drove the other way and stopped at a 24-hour gas station on the Tampa side where light collects bugs and men who need coffee. I wrote 4 lines, block caps, no flourish 007, welfare check complete, no child in vehicle. 009, driver acknowledged orders. 012, Tacoma Pass turnout, no contact. 026, phone call to council, voicemail left, 2 sentences. I bought a bottle of water I didn't want, and drank it because ritual is how you end sharp hours without cutting yourself. Morning didn't wait for me to sleep. It started where procedure had left off. At 8:31 the storage manager called Nora, then Nora called me. The deputy who smelled solvent yesterday came back with a second unit and a clipboard that meant authorization. The overlock wasn't for show anymore, the key turned. I didn't go. I stayed where men stay when they want outcomes, not stories. The manager later described it in the tone of someone reading meter numbers, a set of plastic bins, 3 sealed envelopes with my surname misspelled, 1 with the brokerage's logo, 5 blank. Consent to represent, forms with the Kennedy Boulevard watermark we already knew, a rubber mat still off gassing, a printout titled, MON, storage/TE, meet at 6/WED, move early. They bagged the items. They closed the door. They wrote down times. Law doesn't admire itself in a mirror. It checks boxes and moves to the next address. By noon a bank compliance officer with a voice made of carpet fibers rang my phone. He said the language men read when they want to sound like buildings. We received your council's letter and your recordings. We've reviewed internal cues. We will not discuss personnel. I replied. Your operator read me your policy on a recorded line. That's all I needed. He didn't apologize. Buildings don't. Later, Nora forwarded me a second letter, the kind that says, remediation steps, and training, and never uses the word fired, but leaves a badge number without a name stapled to the margin of your day anyway. Badge 4816 will have to explain to a room that records everything YQ that says, contested, had his fingerprints on it. That's not my victory to celebrate. It's a paragraph in a file somewhere that now reads like a slow door closing. Home did what homes do after nights like that, pretended to be normal, until normal remembered itself. Hannah ate toast with cinnamon sugar. She shook herself, careful, like the act had new math. She asked me if she had to change her phone passcode. I told her she could if it made her feel less watched. She nodded, then said she wanted the atlas back on the shelf where it always lives. I put it there. Self-respect is sometimes a book sitting where a book sits. Tina moved through the kitchen correcting objects nobody had wronged. She didn't ask me for a scene. I didn't give her one. Nora told me to keep the rest of my words for judges and clerks. We filed the petitions we had already prepared, temporary exclusive use of the house, sole decision-making for Hannah while the court sorted the accusation from the arithmetic, and a motion to preserve digital evidence across accounts. The clerk stamped, the scanner sang, and the docket put a number on what used to be air. Afternoon brought a small surprise I didn't deserve but accepted. A neighbor left a coil of heavy tie-downs on my porch with a note that said, "Found in the street near your curb. Thought these were yours." They were mine in the way everything that tried to move me without asking had been mine for a week. I photographed the coil, logged the minute, folded the note into the same clear sleeve that holds the tote inventory, and the blue ink sticker photo, and the brokerage letter with its watermark. When you live by ledgers, you learn to stack paper rain until it weighs more than weather. I wish there were a dramatic apology to report, or a speech that sealed anything. There wasn't. There was a call from the school counselor asking if Hannah felt safe and a simple yes from a kid who now knows how to write her own checklist. There was a short message from compliance saying a hold on beneficiary changes had become a lock until a judge says otherwise. There was a second envelope from the brokerage stamped, "Disregard prior notice," which is the blandest way English knows to say. We tried and failed. There was a voicemail from a number I won't save, he said. This is over when you stop. I replied, only in the logbook, with the sentence that belongs to men who repair cold machines for a living. This is over when valves close. The last piece fell without noise. Late afternoon, the deputy called to confirm his report. No child, no removal, orders served, storage under hold, items inventoried. I thanked him and didn't add the life advice men like me always want to hand other men who do their job without speeches. He had his own list to finish. That night I cleaned the stylus on my turntable and set a record I hadn't played since spring, an LP a retired driver gave me when he handed me his atlas. The house was quiet in a true way now, not tense, just breathable. I wrote the last line on the last page of the notebook I'd been grinding through since Friday. No shouting. Paper. Cameras. Time. Then I put the notebook in the safe deposit sleeve with everything else. Documents don't forgive you if you let them get lonely. I don't know what story Tina will tell herself about this week. I know the one I'll tell Hannah in a year when we drive across the bay with windows down and the bridges look like strings someone tuned. That grown men don't run at noise. They do arithmetic. They move valves. They keep maps where everyone can see them. They choose now over later when later becomes a weapon. I did not win a scene. I did not lose myself. A court will do its part slowly, which is the only pace I trust now. The tote in the bank box is an exhibit. The unit with the blue door is a fact. The badge with 4 numbers is a reminder that inside systems are only as clean as the hands that touch them. The kid who put a pillowcase on a neighbor's porch because her dad wrote 3 rules is the only line in this ledger that reads like profit. If you're expecting a punch line, I don't own one. I own a quiet house, a car that still starts, a job where compressors fail on Monday mornings, and a stack of paper that walked a lie into daylight. That's enough. Subscribe if you want more stories about real men who don't scream. They act. Coldly. To the end.